Harvey Dunn plays a major role, I guess we could say, through his illustrations of stories. And you need to also remember that this is before the time of radio and television, and so the way that Americans are getting their entertainment, their news, their social commentary, their education is through these magazines like Collier's, Harper's Bazaar, McClure's, Good Housekeeping, Saturday Evening Post.
This is doing the work of propaganda, but it's also doing the work of communication, right? So it's telling the people back home, giving them a view of what trench warfare looks like, which is a relatively new intervention in military technology at the time, and giving them a sense of the filth of it, right? The intensity of it. But it's also jingoistic, right? And I want us to sort of take a look at, and it's coincidental because of the structure of a rifle itself, but the ways in which the angles, the forms, and the objects in their hands, the rifles, the bayonets, are all sort of obviously phallic, right? So that they're drawing attention to sort of the firmness, the strength of, the projection of, you've got the aggressive posture of the soldier approaching the trench. Over here, in the center picture, I think one of the things that strikes me about this is the perfect ease of the bodies, right? Whereas in the others, they're obviously in motion, they're doing the work of fighting the war. What we have here are these soldiers who are returning from the trenches, right? And although these images were censored for being too raw, these are by no means, of course, the rawest artistic material we got from World War I, right? So I wanted to read you a poem by Siegfried Sassoon, who's one of the British World War I poets. Shaken from sleep and numbed and scarce awake, out in the trench with 3 hours watch to take, I blunder through the splashing murk and then hear the gruff muttering voices of the men crouching in cabins candle chinked with light. Hark! There's the big bombardment on our right, rumbling and bumping, and the dark's a glare, a flickering horror in the sectors where we raid the Boche, men waiting, stiff and chill, or crawling on their bellies through the wire. What? Stretcher bearers wanted? Someone killed? 5 minutes ago I heard a sniper fire. Why did he do it? Starlight overhead, blank stars. I'm wide awake, and some chap's dead. So it's sort of, again, not that this is the poem about this canvas, but we see these little false stars, right, appearing through the crowd, through the sky. And again, that muzzle flash, right? I mean, imagining this is the moment that the man is taking aim at the person he has in his sights, right? This is that moment that is impossible to capture because of physics, because photography is not going to, at this moment, catch that exact moment. The painting is what can, and that he chose to take this one moment, I think is really, really important because it projects once more the successfully phallic masculinity, right? It is the extension of the male organ. It is there, it is ready, and in this moment it is firing. I like to think this is sort of post-coital, right? This is the moment. They've gone out, they've fought, they've done their trench duty, they've done their watch. They're done, right? You can see with the sort of the cock of his head, the angle of his body, that there's both exhaustion and a sense of accomplishment, I like to think, in this image. And then again, thinking too of the purpose of this canvas as both propaganda and news. This gives us the sense that we're doing fine, right? Here we are, we've returned. There's no stress here, I'm chill, I've done my work. And so it's giving us a sense of masculinity that is poised, that is firing, and that is satisfied, right? I want us to think about the ways in which the rigidity of bodies in movement over there and here in death, right? Rigor mortis, sort of the rictus of the held rifle, all embody forth a certain sort of whole body phallic masculinity that again romanticizes conflict, pulls people into this sort of patriarchal romance of the male body in war, and generates that kind of interest and support for the war. Right? A lot of scholars who have read the World War I literature, the primary documents, a lot of them in the British War Museum, have drawn attention to the fact that trench warfare also put male bodies into contact with each other in more intensely social and erotic ways than it had before, right? And so that there were homosocial or homoerotic relationships in World War I is a fact, right? We've got a lot of documents and poetry and texts and autobiographies that attest to this. It can be overstated, yes. But on the other hand, the proximity of those bodies that are suffering, the proximity of those bodies that need tactile tenderness in the absence of a female body, right? The nurses, as we see in the cathedral painting, right, are working in these organized camps and setups, technically, at least according to the aesthetic world that we're dealing with here. And so they're not on the front lines, right? And so there's a need to be helped, to be reassured of life that was, in some cases, queer, in some cases, not queer, right? Just contingent and of the moment. I just wanted to draw our attention to this in a way as an extension from the World War I images we were just looking at, which are in some cases explicitly violent, these moments of firing, these moments of discharge, versus the sort of placidity of these scenes. Both of them are doing a certain kind of gendered ideological work, right? And the others, you're selling the war, right? You're selling violence, you're selling male violence. Here, what are we selling, right? And with the bodies of the men, we see two completely contrasting figures, right? Both in the bodies of the white man and the white woman in there, and the men who are standing and arranged around these figures. Now, what we might still be selling here in 1917, 1918 is the persistence of colonialism. Sub-Saharan Africa did not gain independence in any real form until roughly 1956, 57, with Ghana and the Gold Coast, moving down through Sub-Saharan Africa, and Cape Coast Colony, or South Africa, where much of this, I think, is set, was still under British, Dutch, and other colonial rule. These are spats, right? These hybridized colonial subjects who are living halfway between a certain kind of let's see here, the crowd scene, right? The very sort of stereotypically ethnographic images of Africans half-clothed, with jewelry, wearing loincloths, etc., versus the Africans who are approaching the white woman in this scene, right? They have spats on, they appear to be wearing some kind of shorts. It's not a wrap as far as I can tell. They've got bits of a collar you can see at the top of his clothing. And you have, likewise, this head tilt, right? Which you see in this African subject here, and that African subject there. And there's a certain kind of reinforcement of that idea of the noble savage, right? The black sub-Saharan African male is a noble creature that should be left to his own natural and native devices and lets the white Europeans take the resources, govern the territory, administer the power, disperse those resources. But there's a certain proudness, right, that's telegraphed in that head tilt upwards that doesn't show the kind of deference that these bodies clearly expect in those couching positions, right, just relaxing, waiting for this tribute to come. So it's giving us a sort of a sense of the status quo as an argument in and of itself, right? We should let this be. Let's just relax here, sit here for a while, and let's maintain this, right?
So, what is this image, this construct of femininity that is conjured when we think of the magazine Cosmo? You're at the grocery store. There it is.
Today?
Yeah, today. And then we're going to go back in the past, yeah. What about that version of femininity that just pops in your mind? The Cosmo girl.
Very sexual.
Yeah, aggressive sexuality, right? I mean, there's always cleavage, right? What? Gutsy, sure, strong. There's a strength there, right? I mean, very made up, usually like big glamour hair, right? So yeah. So the face of Cosmo that we're talking about, we're now familiar with, was engineered initially in 1965 by the then new editor Helen Gurley Brown, and spoke to a public probably aware of the dawning of second wave feminism. Okay, I think 60s, the dawning of second wave feminism in the 60s. So the public may have had some cognizance of that, right? She envisioned a new audience of young career-oriented women and focused content on male-female relationships, self-improvement, and inspirational articles for young women to develop their full potential as both wage earners, which is singular, okay, at that time, and as sexual beings. So both. The public Brown describes is that she's addressing, as she puts it, quote, the grown-up girl, interested in whatever can give you, this is her directly addressing her public, okay, and whatever can give you a richer, more exciting, fun-filled, friend-filled, man-loved kind of life. You also want to be inspired, entertained, and sometimes whisked away into somebody else's world. Okay. So in thinking about what constitutes a public, so the intended audience for Cosmopolitan in the 1920s and the 60s and now, right? I mean the kind of public that comes into being only in relation to texts and their circulation, okay, in this magazine. What is this representation of femininity telling us about what it means to be a woman? What story is being told here? And I mean literally a story. Storytelling is one of the major ways we orient and organize our thinking about the world, how we exchange and circulate shared realities. So the scene.
It's a crime scene.
Okay, how do we know this? Like, what are the signifiers of that, y'all?
The dead body.
It's on the floor. Okay, so but all we have is a foot, but we're going to assume that's a dead body. Why not passed out drunk?
It's a male foot.
Well, there's a lot of violence going on. There's a lot of disarranged furniture, whatever.
Okay, so I see that. So yeah, so it's a male shoe, so we can ascribe gender to that, right?
The books on the floor with the pages.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? A torn curtain.
Do you think that are those the pages torn out of the book, or what do you think? I don't know. Where is this, though? Is this in the lobby of a hotel?
Looks like a parlor. Someplace elegant.
Someplace elegant. So we could make some class assumptions there. I'm sorry, what did you say?
Bookcase.
Yeah, okay. A parlor
There's painting on
somewhere.
the wall, there's velvet furniture,
Yeah.
there's a period nature, there's sconces, there's a lot of decorative plaster work going on. It's just
Yeah.
it's a rich person's
Yeah.
home or setting.
Yeah, and the lushness of her clothes even.
Well, I don't think we can ignore the expression on her face.
That's it. Well, I was gonna, yeah, let's go there. Let's get into that expression on her face.
Her legs are crossed to it.
Oh yeah, they are. They're kind of close together and
And she's against the wall. She's been pushed back.
Or she has backed up.
or she would like.
Yes, but I mean, I read that as being threatened,
Yeah.
as opposed to being active.
I read that as setting herself.
Well, yes.
So is the posture a passive posture and a defensive posture?
Defensive.
Defensive, or shock. It could be shock.
Do we want to do the reveal of what it actually is? And does it matter? Does it matter?
She's an actress, and she does live in a very wealthy home with her mom. And the spatted foot that you see is a gangster who is in love with her, and he's bothering her, and she's worried about her reputation as an actress if this guy keeps bothering her. So he shows up at her house unannounced, and he begins to profess her love, and she laughs in his face, and he has a heart attack and dies. And
all the chaos.
hence all the chaos, but it gets better. Her mother, who's also, I would say, a Cosmo gal, gets her, well, basically the next door neighbor happens to be the actress's mother's lover. And so she convinces him to wrap up the guy in a drape. And they tow him off in her lover's boat and drop him into the ocean. Wow. And then the actress feels bad, and so she goes to the cops and tells them the truth, and all is forgiven, and she pursues her career.
So all this destruction is just a case of overexuberant illustration?
Yes. It's basically, you know, evidently the death scene is quite dramatic. And he, as he's grabbing at his heart, he's knocking all of this stuff down.
I just wanted to share with you kind of the work we do as rhetoricians and feminist rhetoricians. So during this time, I just want to say, and we don't have time to look at another painting, but you know, Freud is writing on femininity during this time and talking about the riddle of womankind and the dark continent of femininity. And so everybody's like, what does woman want? What are her desires, right? And so apparently, according to Cosmo and Helen Gurley Brown, what do we want? We want a good job. We want good sex, right? We want fun. I mean, right? That is the Cosmo answer to that question. What does woman want, right? That story.
She wants Burt Reynolds.
What?
Burt Reynolds. Remember, he was the centerfold in the first edition of Cosmopolitan.
I didn't know that.
Oh, no? He was nude with